My guest this week is an anti-regressive bounty hunter, a YouTuber, and a Twitter warrior. Unfortunately, he thinks Star Trek is better than Star Wars, but nobody's perfect. Lalo Dagach, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me.
So I'm very excited to sit down with you because we've been doing this in 140 characters for about a year now.
Yeah.
And we're going to go a little more than 140 characters.
Yeah, I think it'll be good. I think it's good to get deeper into it.
Yeah. So we're going to do a lot of regressive stuff. We're going to talk some foreign policy, all kinds of stuff. But first I want to do a little bit on your history because you live in Chile.
Yeah.
You're in LA, I think, right now for the first time in about 10 years or so?
10 years, yeah, I haven't been back.
And you were born here?
I was born here, so I'm basically back home. But you know, I was born in the U.S. in LA. My parents were both immigrants from Chile. My father went to UCLA, studied physics there, and then when I was about 12, we moved back to Chile. I'd never been there before, prior to the move. Then I grew up there, and then I decided to come back to the U.S. for college, went to UCLA, and then I just went on this kind of, journey of education and travel. I went to Korea and studied at Yonsei University, then lived in Japan for a while, then went back to Chile, missing my family because, Chile to Asia is very far.
That's a long trip.
That's a long trip, like 30-hour flight. So I decided to go back, and then even there, I went to university to get a postgraduate degree in international relations. And I studied all kinds of things in Korea. I studied language. In Santa Barbara, I studied film studies. So it's been this kind of big thing. I never really did much more than educate myself up, pretty much. So it is kind of serendipitous that there was a mark, there where I just kind of lost it with what happened with Sam Harris and Ben Affleck, and I had never had like any kind of social media presence online, but I felt there I had to do something about it. I was educating myself about politics. I got very interested in it from traveling, and I had become aware of like Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, specifically Sam Harris. After Christopher Hitchens, who was more the political side, but then Sam Harris started getting into the political aspects, and I thought, oh, this is an interesting guy.
Yeah, but before we get to all that, I know you're jumping.
I'm jumping on it. Yeah.
So we had never met before because you were living.
Yeah, definitely.
But I've been on your podcast and we tweet all the time.
Right.
We had dinner the other night and we had about 4 hours of we laid it out with the Regressives. So we're going to try to
until the restaurant closed.
Literally, we were the last
people out.
They kicked us out, but we're going to try to recreate some of that conversation because I think we hit on all the things that are important to us.
Yeah.
But before we get into some of that, first, I just want to re-illustrate what you just said is you're actually educated in some of this stuff. You're not just some guy, some Twitter avatar tweeting about some of this stuff. You've studied foreign policy. You've traveled the world. You've studied film. I mean, even that it's related to some of this narrative and all that.
Representation, what's going on with, with the Oscars, there's a lot of identity, because to me, I went to Korea because I was studying Korean film. That's what I specialized in, and I learned culture and history from that. Yeah. And that, gave me the enthusiasm to learn more about politics and culture about other places. So, film even is a lot about that.
Yeah. So I think it's just important to say that because there's so many people that put themselves out there, and it's like, do you actually know anything that you're talking about?
Yeah,
were you educated in any of this?
Yeah.
I mean, I studied politics, but there's so many people just talking, and it's nice to know that you're talking to somebody that has some background in some of this stuff. But also your family background I find really fascinating, and I learned something about it the other night that I didn't know. So your grandfather, I think on your father's side, so your great-grandfather was Palestinian, correct?
Yes, my great-grandfather on my father's side came from Palestine, early 20th century. Despite what a lot of people think, the first mass migration of Palestinians came under the Ottoman Empire. Right. And they were mostly Christians.
So that's an interesting piece because I think most people, I don't want to get too into the history of that because then we'll be talking for 8 hours. But a lot of people don't understand that land was controlled by the Ottoman Empire, what basically today is Turkey. And then after World War I, it was then controlled by the British for about 50 years. And then since 48, the whole area has been split up 18 different ways. But, I said this to you the other night, I thought that your family was Muslim because
I get that a lot.
Just because you said that you have Palestinian ancestry. Now I know, for all that I know, that's a pretty it's a pretty silly thing for me to say because at one time there were a lot of Palestinian Christians. There actually aren't anymore.
Right. Yeah. So it's a good thing to point out that the fourth largest population of Palestinians in the world is in Chile. It's the largest population outside the Middle East. I think it's like Jordan, Syria, and fourth is Chile. Yeah. And it has 500,000 Palestinians, and basically across the board, it's all people who came from Orthodox Christian background.
Yeah.
And now a lot of them has converted to Catholicism, which is the religion of the country for over many generations.
Yeah. Do you feel like Palestinian Christians are sort of lost in this whole mess? Because even for the fact that until 2 days ago, I just assumed that your family was Muslim is sort of interesting, because
I think it has
people don't talk about Palestinian Christians.
I think it has a lot to do with where they immigrated to, because in Chile there's not a lot of conflict. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that they're not Muslim Palestinians. So the Jewish community in Chile and the Palestinian community have no problems.
Right.
Right, because it's just like nobody really cares, and there's not really problems of like religious terrorism or anything. So it's very like pluralistic and kind of meshed together. More people care about economics and the political sphere. Yeah. But there's about 500,000 people of Palestinian background in Chile. That's twice as much as the Palestinians in the United States. But they have a larger voice in the U.S. Right, but Palestinians and Christian Palestinians in Chile are kind of put aside, and people assume that they are synonymous, Palestinian and Muslim. Yeah. And I don't think it should be like that. It would be like saying Christian is synonymous to American, and I think a lot of people would say, well, that's even kind of offensive. Right. But it's kind of accepted.
A lot of people on the left would say that's offensive. Yeah.
But even a lot of people on the left who consider themselves liberals are very happy to kind of mesh together Arab in general with Muslim, and I don't think that should be done.
Yeah, and it's funny how people conflate that, because I've even seen you one time arguing with another Palestinian on Twitter, and basically I don't even want to mention the guy, but he basically said, well, it was something to the effect of like, you're not a real Palestinian, or you're not a good Palestinian.
Exactly that.
Or something to that
you're
effect.
not a real Palestinian.
Yeah, and I thought, not only is that's actually offensive, like saying that my history isn't my history because I don't believe the same things, but I think you were illuminating a point about terrorism related to that, that there aren't, right now, for the few Christians that remain in the West Bank, they aren't stabbing people and blowing things up. So there is some religious component to that that's separate than national identities. Do you think that's fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. So, actually I have some still family, distant family, but still family I talk to, who I have an uncle in Chile, and he has some like cousins and things like that who live in Israel and partly in Palestine, and I hear about them all the time. The hardest it is for them in Israel is because of discrimination from Palestinian Muslims, right? Not from Israelis.
Right. So meaning that they're citizens, the ones that live in Israel proper, are citizens of the State of Israel.
Yeah, and they're
Christian Arab citizens of the State of Israel.
Right. Yeah. And they're forgotten. Like you've pointed out many times, the minorities of the minorities are the most forgotten people usually. And they face sometimes the hardest criticism. But I think Sam Harris has pointed this out. It's almost like an experiment going on where you have, basically the same people with a different religion in the same situation, but only one of them are acting a certain way. Yeah. And I mean, even in Chile, like my family's background is Orthodox Christian in background, but my grandfather, my father, my brother, my mother, my whole family, all atheists. Right. Right. So it's not really, to me, even religion is a connection to my heritage. Just in a kind of ancestry way, I know that they were Orthodox Christians coming here, but it's not something I relate to. And I feel it's okay to feel like a connection to being Palestinian and not the religious aspect. And I think it's the same for a lot of Jews as well. A lot of Jews are like, I love a lot of the tradition, I practice a lot of it, and I love that I have this Jewish background, but the religion doesn't really mean much to me.
Yeah.
It's nice, it's great having it there, but I don't really...
It's not great, it's irrelevant.
Right,
I've said it 1,000 times, I'm not religious in any way
But don't hold me to it.
I like Curb Your Enthusiasm and bagels, that's good enough, all right, well, I'm glad we did a little of that, because I think it's good for people to understand. It also explains partly why when we first connected on Twitter, I thought there was something so interesting about you, because your original Twitter handle was Chile's Atheist.
Right, yeah.
And it said something about being a Palestinian, Chilean, atheist, something. Yeah. And I was like, wow, this guy's got a lot. Like, there's a lot in there. And I think, and then a short while after, you eventually changed it to your actual name, Lalo Dagach, which I think was an important moment for you, right?
Yeah, no, I decided to kind of cut that out a lot. One is because I felt like there is a responsibility to use your real name, and also I kind of wanted to get out the identity politics of it. Sure. But I was aware of the fact that by putting those aspects out there, Chilean and Palestinian, is not as easy for a lot of the regressives, who we'll talk about later, to cut me down. And they tried. Like, I got people tweeting me saying, I don't think, like, so I would present an argument to them, and I would show evidence. And their response to me is saying, I don't think you're in Chile. I don't think you are who you say you are. Now, why do they say that?
Does Chile buy you cred? I didn't even know that.
That's the thing.
Where's that on their list of grievances or something?
And at one point, I even took a video of myself. Like, I was at a courthouse, and I took a video, like Chile's courthouse in the back to like show like I am who I am. But why do they do that? Because they even said, I think you're in the U.S. Now, if I was, now they have something to attack me with. Now it's like, oh, you're in the U.S. Now you're white. You're not Palestinian. You're the typical person I can cut down. You know, I can say, oh, you know, this is white privilege. You don't know what you're talking about. It's not easy to do that with somebody like Majid Nawaz, Ayan Hirsi Ali, though they try. They try. They will do it anyway. They will do it anyway. But yeah, it doesn't come from a place that like I believe in white supremacy, or I'm a right-wing conservative. You know, my family's the most classical liberals there are. Like, you know, if we can go down the list. You know, against homophobia, against racism, freedom of speech. You know, all the things that like Bill Maher says. You know, you're a classical liberal. I just believe in the right ideas, liberal ideas.
Yeah, and this shows you really the power of science, because I think you told me your grandfather was a physicist.
My grandfather was a physicist.
Your father?
Also a physicist. My brother also a physicist. I have an uncle who worked for NASA for a while.
So that shows you, I mean, right there, it's almost like you don't need much more from this whole conversation to show that the power of science, people that have to believe in reality and have to believe in quantifiable things based on evidence, actually all the other stuff, the identity stuff, all the rest of it sort of melts away if you really base things in science.
Yeah, I mean, my father was like, he's always proud, like, you know, he comes from a Palestinian background. You know, he's happy he comes from Chile, you know, all the kind of identity without the identity politics. He likes the identity, but he doesn't take positions based on those. That's identity politics. Right. I am a Palestinian, therefore I'm against, you know, Israel, Jews. No, my father, you know, he evaluates things based on the evidence and the facts. So, you know, even the people I grew up admiring, I think I told you before, you know, Albert Einstein, Richard Feynman, Carl Sagan, the voices of reason, were Jewish. People I didn't know at the time when I was little were Jewish, because my father just doesn't talk that way.
And by the way, none of those people were religious.
None of them were religious.
That's the interesting thing.
And they could care less about the identity. You know, it's like if my father sat down with any other scientist of any other background, they would probably only get emotional about physics. And I've seen that. They get into arguments, and I've seen, you know, plates fly, but for physics, you know, like this is the evidence, right? They don't care about like the, and
isn't that
scientists in general are like that. They don't care. They don't care.
Well, that's why, you know, for all the time that I've spent here talking about religion, it's like, I think it's so ridiculous. Like, at the end of the day, I think religion is utterly ridiculous. And yet I've had to address it because it's been latched on to so much related to politics and everything else. But yet I'm talking about something that fundamentally I think is nonsensical.
We had a conversation about Israel-Palestine the first time I asked you to speak with me on video. And we're talking about Israel-Palestine. We try to, like, basically we look at it in the most rational, logical way possible. And from like our different backgrounds. But ultimately, we have a good conversation because we care about facts. Well, what's going on here? Now, it's difficult to come to any conclusion because we're looking for a rational conclusion in an irrational situation with irrational actors. And we're trying to look at it in the most rational way possible. And ultimately, we're not going to be that successful.
So that's interesting because actually, of all the times I've ever debated the Middle East with anyone, the conversation with you, usually I end them and I'm like, fuck, why did I do that again? Because you get nowhere. You get nowhere, and people, as we know with the regressives, they like narrative over facts. So even if you give them facts, that's scary. Then they just get angry usually. But we had a really interesting, thorough conversation. It's on your channel on YouTube, so I welcome anyone to watch it. And it gets away from, it leaves you with a feeling like, all right, we don't know the answers, but let's talk, let's see how far we can evolve with this thing, right?
Yeah. No, well, so let's talk about the other issues that we like so much with that brought us here.
Wow, you're giving me the segue.
I am.
This is your first time on camera. You're giving me the segue. All right, let's go. Okay, so you had your awakening, I think, with all of this and with what's happened on the left is very similar to mine.
Yeah.
And it had a lot to do with the Ben Affleck, Sam Harris thing. And even as I say it now, I think, you know, we've talked this into oblivion already. Talked about it with Sargon last week. Going to keep talking about it. But I think it's important because it was such a monumental moment for so many people. So I'll throw you the softball.
Well, yeah, I think there was actually two events that really split the entire left. Outside of the right wing, which, you know, as classical liberals, we are like, okay, you know, the Daily Show kind of banter, get it? We don't care.
Right.
But on the Daily Show,
those guys are ridiculous.
Those guys are ridiculous. We can laugh about Fox News all day. But then, like, okay, now we have our little circle and what's going on here. Mm-hmm. And basically with 9/11, and this is, you can get a lot from like what Christopher Hitchens was saying, that he used to be very on par with Noam Chomsky and a lot of other people in politics. And after 9/11, it kind of split there. And basically the political divide was, did this happen because of just American foreign policy and we're responsible for this, it's just payback? Or is there something also intrinsically wrong with culture and religion and a mentality that they're bringing there? Mm-hmm. And that was a political split. But then I think the politics kind of bled into this kind of new social justice, regressive kind of mentality. And I saw little glimpses of it. I saw people telling me, like, you know, well, I would say I've read the Quran, I didn't enjoy it. And people told me you're a racist for that. Right. I'm a racist because I read a book and I didn't like it. Am I a racist against, you know, 50 Shades of Grey because I didn't like it?
Right.
You know, so then I think the peak of that was Ben Affleck with Sam Harris. So, you know, Sam Harris comes on there, you've gone over this a million times, he goes on there, we have to be able to criticize bad ideas, but, you know, but we shouldn't be bigoted against specifically people. Mm-hmm. You know, we can still be respectful of people, respect their freedom of speech, you know, look at them individually, but we can look at ideologies and say, you know, there's something wrong here.
And then quoted polls to show you certain amount of people believing certain things.
Yeah, I mean, the polls are there. Just put in Islam into Pew Research and look at the data there. You know, support for Sharia law, support for gay marriage, or acceptability of homosexuality, abortion rights. Should women be able to dress the way they want? You just go down the list, and Muslim states are just awful. Yeah. And it's not just like 50-50, like we're talking like 90. I sent you recently the one about acceptance of homosexuality. And like in Muslim states that they are accepting of homosexuality was like 0%, 0%, 1%, 2%. And we're talking dozens of countries. Yeah. And we're talking hundreds of millions of people. Yeah. Right? So Sam Harris throws that out, and Ben Affleck calls him a racist. Essentially, that's not a big deal, because just, okay, Ben Affleck is just, you know, doesn't know what he's talking about. What really bothered me was the next day. And I used to be a fan of the Young Turks, who used to be on there. And I thought, okay, Cenk, I like Cenk. He's gonna tear this down. And no, he sides with Ben Affleck. And I see The View, they're siding with Ben Affleck. All these shows, all these liberals, people who's like, I'm for, against homophobia, I'm for women's rights, and we're talking about the places where it's the most problematic right now, despite anything Reza Aslan says. It is that way. Right. You know, get over it. Yeah, it exists everywhere, but we're talking in a spectrum. Where is it the worst? You know, where is it bad?
So to be clear, they suddenly were siding with the guy who just threw out the red meat on this, just the easy answer that sounds good, makes you feel good.
Right.
They're racist, versus the guys who have consistently stood for liberal values, in this case being Bill Maher.
So why did this happen, I think? And it's good to kind of look back. Yeah, okay, they're regressive. We didn't like what Ben Affleck said. A lot of people sided with him. But what exactly happened in these last few years? What I think happened is it was multiculturalism going off the rails. So you have kind of two roads intersecting. One is where people who, you know, we kind of grew up on this idea of multiculturalism, that it's good to be accepting of people of other nationalities, other cultures, other religions. And okay, that's a good idea. But at the same time, we're against racism, homophobia, and all this stuff. So we have this crossroads where, okay, we have to be accepting of other cultures, but it turns out a lot of these cultures are have some of the worst liberal values we've seen. They're extremely conservative, they're very homophobic, they're very against women's rights.
Right.
And then, okay, what do I do here? And a lot of liberal minds exploded.
They went nuts.
They went nuts. Like, what do I do in this case? I am supposed to be super tolerant,
yeah,
or I'm supposed to call out liberal values. And what happened was that there was a divide, right? And there's the people, and I think there's also, you could throw in conservatives there. The conservative message is like, okay, what's happening here is that all these people are just backwards and stupid, and it's intrinsic to who they are.
Yeah.
You know, the Donald Trump now side of the argument.
Right.
But then the other extreme is to say, no, what we have to do is never criticize these people for these things they're doing. And I think the middle road is you, me, Sam Harris saying, we can be multicultural and tolerant and against racism. We can do all these things. And at the same time, we can call out the cultures for their illiberal values, which is even like, I'd like for people to call out Chile, even for their liberal values. Please do it. You know, there's a lot of problems there. It's one of the few countries where abortion is illegal across the board, even if the mother's life is in danger. Absolutely, and it's completely related to Catholicism and religion. Mm-hmm. Please talk about that. You know, call it out. I know it's a small country. It's not right up on the board, but I wouldn't mind. Like, you're not being
I'll get
racist.
to it next week.
Right. But you're not being racist for talking about it. It doesn't hurt me. Yeah. Right? It's not like, oh, Chileans are all backwards now. No, it's like we all have our problems.
Right.
Right, yeah.
So that moment, it was clearly big for me. It was big for you. It was big for a lot of people. You get online and you started taking down the people that you felt were giving bad ideas. And this was really before, I was still working at the Young Turks at the time. This was before my awakening had sort of fully formed, and I became aware of a couple people like you, and I was like, Jesus, here's this guy half a world away that I know nothing about, that's sort of anonymous, Palestinian, I don't know what's going on here, but this guy's braver than me right now. And that's where I was interested in you, and I thought you used technology, you used all the tools of social media properly to expose this stuff. So that must have been very empowering for you.
Well, it wasn't my idea to be empowering. At first, that happened I think in the same 2 weeks that the Sam Harris thing happened, I made a video on YouTube. I'd never made a video on YouTube. I wrote a blog. I'd never written a blog. Yeah. And I didn't know what to do with these. Like, but essentially I wanted to talk with people. I needed to know I'm not insane, that I'm still liberal. It can't be that I'm racist. Yeah. And I looked for a community, and I found it on Twitter, and I just started posting, and as you've seen, like in a very certain way, I posted clips of people saying certain things, and it would be easy for me to go on there and just attack these people and call them, you're racist, you're Nazis, but no, let these people speak for themselves. And what the great thing is that people really, it called to people. You know, a lot of people rallied to me. I didn't expect to like get the following I did, but I suspected that these people needed a voice. And I'm just one voice among many. Now it's you, and Bill Maher's right up there. You had Sargon on before. And people are hungry for it because they feel like I'm a real liberal. These people are not, and no one is speaking for me.
Yeah, well, I think maybe that's why the real-time thing was so interesting, because the second he said racist, I thought, I've told Sam this when he sat in that very chair. I didn't really know who Sam was before that. I had never read any of his books. I had sort of ancillary known him, but I thought, here's a guy who just said the truth. He just quoted some polls.
Something really simple and
basic, right? He said nothing basic. He didn't say anything racist or even bigoted. He quoted a couple of polls, right? And here's a pretty measured guy who's not worked up and whatever, who's just trying to lay out some numbers. And when he said racist, and I'm thinking, I agree with this guy. I'm not a racist.
Yes.
So we put the onus on me, and I think that's what you mean about the next day. Why the next day was so interesting. Yeah. Because the next day was all the online sites were like, Bill Maher's a racist, Sam Harris is a racist. And
right. Nobody was saying it.
So we put it on us.
Yes, exactly. I needed to say it because I felt no one else was saying it.
Yeah.
Right. And you told me like later that you kind of first avoided the subject, right, for a while. Yeah. And then you decided, no, this needs to be talked about. Yeah. And people need it to be talked about because they're out there, in their couches and in their chairs watching what's going on online. And essentially, like you said, like when Ben Affleck called Sam Harris a racist and so many people on the left agreed with that, they're like, I'm a racist, and I'm not. I'm the most lib guy on the, there is. There just can't be what the message is.
Yeah, and by the way, I don't know if the video that we did a couple weeks ago with Lubna Ahmed is up as we tape this right now.
Right, yeah.
I don't know if we have that video up right now because she's under threat. So this is a secular atheist. So I think this gets to the heart of this. This is a secular atheist who is promoting women's rights and human rights in Iraq, a very hard place to do this.
Right.
And I'm talking to her because I believe in those liberal principles, whereas the people to our left now, the regressives, they wouldn't talk to someone like her because it flips the script on them and they don't know what to do with someone like her, so they just ignore all those people, right?
I don't know her too well, but look at someone like Ayan, right? Like, she's from Somalia, black woman. She went through female genital mutilation. She was almost in a forced marriage, and then she has this enlightenment, this awakening, as you say as well. And she's like, she's all about atheism, and she believes in reason and the Enlightenment. And she goes around saying the most rational thing there is that she's against religion. I think it's harmful. Yeah. And I don't think that's a controversial point of view. And it doesn't mean you're against, religious people specifically. Right, it's like I'm against Majid Nawaz, and his belief of God. It doesn't mean I'm against Majid Nawaz as a person. I think he's great. Right. I would vote for this guy if he ran for president.
Wait, so that's a really beautiful point you're making. So Majid Nawaz, as far as we know, he believes in God. He's trying to reform Islam because he is Muslim. I agree with 99% of what that guy says. So that's the one.
So we are against Majid Nawaz. In that one subject.
I don't like framing it that way, but yeah.
But see, that's the problem. You don't like framing it that way. Why? Because it sounds like you have this big antagonism towards him. Let's take being against gay marriage. You probably know people well, and who probably you like who are against gay marriage. Yeah. Right? And do you to what degree are you opposed to these people on just that subject? Right. And I'm opposed to Majid Nawaz on that one little subject. Yeah. For every other reason, it's like it's fine.
Well, the gay marriage thing is interesting because 5 years ago when gay marriage wasn't legal, it's not like everyone that didn't believe in it was a bigot. But now they would frame it as if everyone who hasn't fully gotten there yet. Progress takes time. Right. But the left would make it seem that everyone who isn't 100% for gay marriage at the moment, which obviously I'm for, right? Right. Yeah. They would have you believe that they're all bigots, and that's just silly. People evolve over time. 5 years ago, Barack Obama wasn't for gay marriage.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
let's look at like two people. Let's take an atheist who, he's homophobic, he's racist, he's a jerk, he's uneducated, but he doesn't believe in God. Now let's take Majid Nawaz, right? Majid Nawaz believes in God, as far as we know, but he's for freedom of speech. He's for every liberal value there is. Who would you rather have over for dinner? Right. So it's just that one subject, that we're kind of against, and that we have to see on a spectrum because his belief in God is not the same as an ISIS person's belief in God. A person who's homophobic, it's very different when you're like, okay, I don't have any real problem with homosexuality. I just don't think they should get married. That's very different from throwing gays off rooftops like ISIS does. Yeah. So I'm against homophobia, I'm against belief in God, but on a spectrum. It depends on how we apply these things. Yeah. Right? So
when you got involved in sort of exposing some of these people, did you ever think it would get this far where you'd be really in it at the level you are? Because you're right. If I'm in the thick of this thing, you're in the thick of this thing.
Never occurred to me. Yeah. Never occurred to me. It's bizarre, but I think it's a lack of voices, maybe. I also think it's that I prepared myself a lot unknowingly to participate in this. It's good to come at this with a lot of evidence and education, not because I'm particularly smart, but because the people who follow me are smart. Because they know their facts, they know their background, and they're like, I need somebody who's just not screaming out racist. Yeah. Because that doesn't mean anything. You've gone over this with Sargon and other people, but yeah, it's an irrelevant attack. And it's to the point where I'm saying that people are being called racist, and they are the smartest person in the room. So it's starting to seem to me that the person in a room with 5 people who's called racist is probably the person who's right and the smartest person in the room.
Right, which is such an unfortunate.
It's horrible.
It's a horrible position for us to be put in because, as Douglas Murray said on Sam Harris's podcast, it's too late to be offended by these people. I'm roughly quoting. Yeah. But their cries, it's like the boy who cried wolf. They've lied so many times. There's nothing left. There's nothing left. So we should have no fear. This is what I've been, what I want my audience to really understand, because when I'm getting these messages where people are saying, I'm afraid to say what I think, and I live in the United States, well, meanwhile, I'm talking to Lubna in Iraq who has real risk, you know, and it's like, if you live in the West and you're afraid to say what you think now, what's it going to be like in 5 years? Well,
you've pointed out, I think in the past, how it's amazing how the atheist community online is all anonymous.
Yeah, so what do you make of that?
Well, I think it still just is very hard to come out as an atheist, you know, despite what a lot of people say. I've talked with people online, and they just don't want to participate on this online conversation, because it's like, I can't talk about religion, I can't say I'm an atheist for my job. Now, what Christian or even Muslim or any religion is going to say, I can't even say just say I'm a Muslim, can't put it in their, like, with their name. On the Twitter account or on their Facebook, it says Muslim, or Christian, or Jew. But if you put atheist on there, it's problematic for your workplace. That's really hard, and shows like there's a certain reflection. And you know, the statistics show that still, you know, atheists are the most distrusted people. They're the least likely Americans to vote, way below gay or Muslim, or if you smoke weed or woman, the worst is atheist.
Right, and weed, we know weed is pretty bad. I can't believe this. We have to wrap this thing up already. We barely scratched the surface here. So I'm going to have you on again in a couple days. We're going to do a sit down with Gad, Gad Saad, who's a great guy who you've also connected with on Twitter, and we'll do a lot more on all of this. So I hope that was a little intro to start this whole thing from happening. So I want to thank Lalo for joining me. You can follow him on the Twitter at Lalo Dagach. And expect a big announcement from him coming pretty soon. All right, thanks for watching. We'll do it again next week.